Right, please. And everyone to your right side, please. Everyone right there. A little more to your right, please. No, right here.
I can't see a thing.
It's a bit bright, isn't it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to tonight's screening.
God, I want to see more movies like this, movies that are just creative for the sake of being creative and free.
We sold out the Elgin Theater!
My people! Toronto Film Festival!
Great films, they leave me feeling a little more alive and connected, and they remind me to laugh and hope and hurt and feel.
I just want to tell great stories, and I want to tell different stories. We don't only have to tell one type of story.
Well, good morning.
Morning.
My name is Eric Kohanek. I'd like to welcome you all to the press conference for Eric Clapton, Life in 12 Bars. The film is part of the TIFF Docs presentation series. It had its world premiere yesterday here in the Bell TIFF Lightbox. There will be additional public screenings today, Wednesday, and Saturday in the Scotiabank Theatre. With us today, we have Eric Clapton, who is, of course, at the core of the film. And next to Eric, we have Lily Fini-Zanuck, who is the director of the film. If you have any questions, please stick up your hands. We'll get a microphone over to you. I'll start things off by saying welcome to the festival. And this documentary was just a mind-blowing one to watch. Your life has been quite an interesting roller coaster ride. How does it feel to have it all encapsulated into a film of this type?
It's very difficult in places, but overall, I think it was a great thing to see from beginning to end. And when we began it, I didn't really grasp where it was going to be focused. I thought it would be just one area, and then when I realized that we had to cover everything, I thought, well, I don't know how they're going to do this in less than 6 hours, you know, but to see it all, it's pretty overwhelming. A lot of it I don't even remember, but the last section is my favorite part, because I look like I've got a smile on my face for the first time in my life.
Lily, I know that the two of you collaborated on your movie Rush back in 1992. But at what point did you think that Eric was the perfect subject for a documentary?
Well, I always thought Eric was a perfect subject, but the documentary was actually something he asked me about. And I knew he had an interesting life, but I didn't want to make assumptions the way, you know, some people do on these things and then you back into. I wanted to have it be a journey where I discovered things about Eric that I didn't know. And that made it very challenging. But I don't think that if Eric hadn't asked me, I would have never asked him to do something like this.
And what was it that made you, or that prompted you to ask her to do the film?
Well, the idea had been floating around for a little while with a group of friends, and it wasn't really coming to fruition. I actually tried to assemble it. I got in touch with the people that are credited in the movie, a couple of friends, and with a lot of material. I had a lot of, and there's a few people that have got, for one reason or another, archives and material of their own. And I knew that there was enough there to make a movie with, but what I didn't want was for there to be a film come out after I died that I didn't think was any good. I mean, as if I would know, you know, but but the point was, I thought it'd be nice to try to I didn't really want to see it. I mean, in a way, with the greatest respect, I didn't want to. But I wanted to know that it would be okay, at least okay. And so I thought, well, there's one person I trust to do this, one person I know. I don't know any film people at all, really, but one person I know who I've worked with that I could trust to do this, and that was Lily. So 2 years ago, we were thinking about it yesterday, but 2 years ago I asked her if she would save my bacon, was the exact as the words I used, and she said yes, without any hesitation. So from then, I didn't really have to do very much to her. And I'm supposed to be a producer, but I know what producers do, and I certainly didn't do any of that.
I have to say that that's one of the remarkable things, because I was somewhat concerned that there may be an impression, because we've been friends for so long, that I would whitewash something, or Eric would say, take it out, and none of that happened, because of the trust that we have, and of the fact that he gave me this responsibility and didn't second guess me. The thing that he did do is that he came up with the idea of Gustavo Santaella, which the score is such an incredible blend, because we didn't want it to be all just Eric's music, because it doesn't work that way. And you can't all of a sudden introduce something orchestral, because it wouldn't blend with Eric's stuff. So it was Eric's idea, and you were even so gracious about that. You said, do you mind if I suggest? So Gustavo has done an incredible job. He was very excited to do it. He's been very generous, and I'm very grateful to you for that idea.
Okay, let's open it up to the floor. We've got a question down here, Bruce.
Good morning, Bruce Kirkland from the Toronto Sun and Post Media News Network. Back in the 70s, I was a rock critic. I apologize for that in advance. But it gave,
What did you do?
It gave me the chance to see you in Buffalo back in the 70s.
And was it like that?
It wasn't one of your better days, put it that way.
Come on, let's tell.
But the point being, at that time, being a young pup, and you were a young pup,
Yeah.
we didn't think about legacy. We didn't, mine in a minor sense, and yours in a major sense. I'm curious, the transition to this point in your life, when you actually are willing and desirous of seeing somebody deal with your legacy, your body of work, your essence as a human being that's provided this amazing music all these years, except in Buffalo. And, but I mean, was there a struggle there to come to terms with the idea of legacy?
Yeah. Well, I haven't had a drink for a long time now, but for the first 10 years of that period, a lot of my thinking and behavior didn't really change. It was a slow evolvement, really. And it was only then, and after I'd had my children, my daughter and my son, I began to realize, and it's actually clear in the film, and I can see it in a form of desperation, that here I am suddenly faced with responsibility, and that I had to do something about it. So my legacy has always been that, really. There's always been a commitment to music as a legacy, too, because I always thought it was important to credit the people where it came from. I've seen myself as a messenger, really, all the time. Always. It's been a principle for me. But to have living beings close to me, my flesh and blood, that I would have any kind of inclination to walk away from, started to have an effect on me. And then I tried to become an example to them. And I don't know how to do that to this day, because I'm quite an isolationist by nature. And so to actually be able to consider what my behavior does to other people is still a very kind of difficult thing for me to apprehend. But it's getting better.
Another question here?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michael Kramer from Zoomer Radio, 45 plus listeners, many of whom have been with you since the very beginning. First of all, on behalf of them, thank you for still being here with us and making music. And what's your hope for this movie to those who have known you from the Yardbirds days and Cream, etc.?
Yeah, I hope that as many people get to see it as can, you know, that it gets to be internationally shown and accepted. Only a few people, but the main point goes back to what I was being asked: is what is the legacy of this film? And it really is that we carry a message. I mean, the underlying thing for me was that to show that from all of that mess, that I could still come to be a reasonably well-behaved human being with a sense of responsibility. So all of that stuff that went before has brought me to that.
Yes, there's a phrase, there's always an equivalent benefit in adversity.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when you are in that spot, you're not thinking about great phrases or anything like that.
No.
But all of that has brought you to this point as well.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, another question down front here.
Hi, Karen Bliss from Billboard and Samaritan Mag, which is a music-heavy magazine about giving back. Youth are listening to EDM now. When I grew up, we had you and Keith Richards and Jimmy Page and later Stevie Ray Vaughan. Guitar sales are down significantly. We've got music counts in Canada and Mr. Holland's Opus, like, you know, trying to get instruments into schools, but it's typically brass and, you know, woodwinds and strings. I mean, you know, the future of the guitar is in jeopardy. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, because young people aren't, you know, listening really to rock music and don't have any guitar heroes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that bad. I really didn't. I'm out of touch. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where it's going to go either. I think anything that has a natural process will end up where it's supposed to be. My kids listen to classic rock. And but that may only be because that's what I've played to them. I mean, from the time they were, you know, their conception, they've been listening to music through the womb. You know, I've played them playlists, just brainwashed my kids. And at the back of it is always the guitar or some kind of solo instrument or a sing. I mean, the music. My belief in music, it's all good. It's all good. I don't think there's any, even stuff that doesn't appear to be so. It's all good.
I would like to answer this question.
The Washington Post did a really big piece in late June, and it said that guitar sales were down from 1.5 million a year to 1 million a year, and that some of the major manufacturers were, you know, in financial difficulties, and Guitar Center was, you know, having financial troubles as well.
Maybe the guitar is over. Or do you want to ask?
Well, I think that it's a little bit the cart before the horse. One of the things that was so interesting to me when I was doing the movie was that Uncle Mac had this show where he was playing blues music that Eric and other musicians of his generation were really exposed to. And there are other musicians that had the exact effect, and they may not have been as talented as Eric, but it took them to this place to have an interest in the guitar. And I think that is a big part of what instrument somebody chooses. He heard this guitar, Eric, he heard this guitar as a 9-year-old boy. He heard this music, and he was touched by it. And he didn't have anything to make it easy. He had an acoustic guitar that he did his best with. And then, this isn't in the movie, but he had an electric guitar with no amp. And he was playing on the strings with no amp, but he said he knew what it would sound like. That is real determination. That is making something work. And I think that that's what happens. If guitar sales are down, maybe nobody's hearing something that moves them. And I also think, in another way, rock and roll and in its origins in blues isn't the popular music of this moment. So, you know, I don't know why. I'd love to do a whole thing on why this post-war generation in the UK was so drawn to the blues and interpreted it so well. But I haven't had time to do that one yet.
Question.
No. Very good. Makes you think. Okay.
Hi, David Fear, Rolling Stone.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
This is a really lovely doc, but watching this, there is a bit of a sense that you're sort of turning the page and then closing the book when you watch this. I know prior to the Madison Square Garden shows that you did in March, and then prior, like the ones you're doing now at MSG and the Forum, you'd sort of flirted with the idea of hanging it up in terms of performing.
Yeah.
Is retirement still something that you occasionally think about, or are you going to be one of those old bluesmen that they just, as long as you can still walk out on that stage on your own 2 feet, you're going to go and play?
Both answers. Yeah, both. Yeah, I've quit. I've got 4 more shows and then it's over. And I've been saying that since I was 17. Well, there's a bit in the film where I talk about going to see this friend of mine, Ben Palmer, and he had to kind of talk me back into the idea of carrying on. And that was when I was 17. I really didn't want. I love to. You know, one of the things I've realized in the last year or so is even if I stopped playing altogether, I could live on just listening to music is enough for me. And it still is. And I find that when I'm working, the only tricky thing about working for me and playing on stage or in the studio or whatever, I don't listen to music anymore. So I don't know what that's about, but it's sort of disturbing for me that I cast all this other stuff aside, stuff that I really need to be absorbing, which connects with what the lady was talking about, understanding what the music scene is doing, and just concentrate on my own thing. So I miss the boat a lot of the time. I catch up all the time. And I kind of think, well, am I in it? Am I behind it? Does it matter? Does it really matter if I carry on playing or not? But the thing is, I love to listen to music and I love to play music, be it on stage, be it anywhere. It's just a question of where's the venue, really?
Question back behind you.
Hi, Eric. Vincent Dowd, BBC World Service Radio. Most of us, well, at least until the internet came along, could forget our mistakes. You've been followed around by cameras and journalists for more than half a century. Was there anything you looked at in the documentary, maybe even something you'd forgotten, and you thought when you were a young guy, oh, how could I have said that, or why did I do that?
Are you kidding? The whole thing. I thought, well, the first whole, you know, right up to the time I stopped drinking, everything I said is absolute blather. You know, I mean, I was talking to Lily about, well, she doesn't agree with me. Although she's not going to agree with me, but there's a certain amount of pompousness that I see when I'm being interviewed, and this sort of, I don't know, some kind of weird expression on my face, like, don't ask me these questions. I know all this stuff, you know, and that's really tough for me to watch, obviously, because. And maybe it's true for all of us when we're young. There's a level of arrogance there about, oh, no, I know it all. Well, only as I get older do I realize that I know nothing at all whatsoever. So for me to watch myself going through all of that, it's not easy.
But the first 10 years, were you not even enjoying it then?
What, making music?
Well, the entire
Yeah,
career, really.
not the entire career, no. I don't like having my picture taken. I don't like talking to journalists, but I love playing music. No offense. It's nothing personal. It's just I don't know how to do it. I really don't know how to do it. And so it can take up a lot of time if you're in that industry, you know. So.
Question right there. And then over here.
Jessica Wong from CBC. I have a question for Lily and then a second part for Eric. The archival footage and photos in this, you've got some really amazing finds. I know last night you mentioned a quip about sometimes getting tips from YouTube footage, but that it was also very difficult. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about digging up some of these incredible pieces of footage, and for Eric, was there anything that popped up when you first watched it that really surprised you that she found?
Well, this was my first documentary, and my voice is kind of loud enough, but anyway, this was my first documentary. Without Chris King, my editor, the beginning of this process was daunting with Chris King. First of all, as I was saying last night, this wasn't a period of time where people like whipped out a phone and said, oh, here, let me have my picture taken with you. So there isn't a lot of stuff. The YouTube thing, what I'm actually referencing is that there is something that you can potentially clear someday, but right now what you have is a crappy version of somebody in the audience or something. I don't know how people did this before the internet. I mean, if I had literally, and a researcher, an archivist had to go to all the places where this material came from, we'd be making the movie for another 4 years. So wait, I'm sorry. Did I answer your question? Well, some things, you know, at the beginning, when Eric and I talked about it, you know, he says, I don't have any pictures. You know, he doesn't, as I said last night, he's not somebody who scrapbooks. So he really didn't have a lot of pictures to his knowledge. Fortunately, because he's lived at Hurtwood for so long, there are some boxes in the attic. But he also had footage that he probably hadn't given thought to in a shed in Devon or something. So there, you know, it becomes a lot of detective work. And then you're kind of dependent upon, oh, I kind of remember somebody said there was a, you know. So it's that process. And this period, as I said, is very difficult because he didn't stand next to his friends and say, take a bunch of pictures of me. And so some of the places that we got the footage were surprising. The home footage, which I didn't, with your mother, etc. I don't think you had seen that, or I don't know. You know, that came from a family member who happened to have kept it from his mother's estate. So we were lucky. The Duane Allman radio interview. When we first started, there was nothing of Duane Allman ever talking about doing Derek and the Dominos. Things like that, those are real treasures.
We have a question in the back and then up front. Nope. Nobody there? Okay, down here then.
Hi, Eric. Jessica Gooden from CBC Music. One of my favorite parts about this doc was just seeing you build all these incredible relationships with all these various musicians throughout your career. Being from Toronto and being a music journalist, I was waiting for one band. I wanted to ask about Toronto's Best, the band. I wanted to ask you what it was about the band that made you want to go work with them, and what do you remember most fondly about that time in Woodstock with them?
Well, I met Robbie, I think, through a friend in LA, and I was given a kind of acetate of Big Pink back in England, and it shook me to the core, you know, and I was in Cream at the time with already a notion that it wasn't going in the right direction, and I thought, well, this is what it is, and I hadn't realized that, you know, I knew who Ronnie Hawkins was, but I didn't realize that was their root. I thought they just appeared out of, or I thought they were all actually from the Mississippi Delta. I didn't even know, you know, Robbie was was Canadian, and so was Richard, and and I fell in love with Richard. We were big pals, you know, and Levon, those guys that have passed, and Rick, they were magnificent heroes for me, and the songwriting and everything. And so I went up to jam with them, but principally I went up, the same sort of thing as happens in this movie, where go and play on the Aretha sessions, I show up with all this paraphernalia on, and the guys are all in, just work clothes. And I said, what good would start? And I said, well, are we going to jam? And they said, we don't jam. We don't jam. We kind of play us. We write songs and play the songs. We don't know how to do that. And I thought, oh my God, these guys are really serious. It was they were craftsmen, and they got it right, and it went on record when it was right, and everything they did. Robbie's still a dear friend of mine. I'll be seeing him soon, and that changed my life. Music from Big Pink, and I've ever since then. And of course, the Dylan Basement tapes was all them too. So just fantastic music, great music.
Okay, we have time for one more question down here.
Bruce again. Leading out of what you just said about the band, I'm curious which guitar players throughout your entire life have moved you to the core and still do?
Oh, a long list. I mean, Jimmy Vaughan, Gary Clark. I mean, these are guys that are colleagues still alive. Robert Cray is up there, but Robert Johnson to begin with, and Freddie King and B.B. King, Albert King, Steve Cropper, Robbie. It goes on and on. There are some great unknown players too. The guitar players that played on the Bobby Bland records. I can't remember his name now. There's a couple of great jazz musicians that I listen to. Kurt Rosenwinkel's a big friend of mine. He's a great musician. It goes on. I like it all, really. I like it all, but just some more than others.
And out of the list of songs that you have produced, is there one that you keep going back to and playing again and again as your favorite?
Yeah, it's the one that I wrote for my wife called Believe in Life. It was on an album called Reptile. And every time we go out on the road, I practice that, and I can't get it perfect enough to play it on stage. It's a shame, but that's my favorite track that I've written and recorded.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much. Eric Clapton, Life in Bars, in 12 bars, rather. Whoops.
It's true, but that's why not?
Part of the TIFF Docs program. In addition to the TIFF screenings, it will hit theaters across the United States later this week, and it will hit television on February 10th on Showtime Cable Network and on other cable outlets. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks, guys, for being here.